You're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Unleash the Geek in You.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Geekcast Radio Network, where once again we've taken on a big project in the form of a top 100 list. So you've seen this before out of the network. We've done the top 100 animated series, animated movies, animated characters. We hit the trifecta there. We've also done the top 100 TV shows. What other ones am I missing, Steve and Dan? We've done some more.
The top 100 animated films, the top 100 animated characters.
Yep. So
top 100 television series.
Yeah, so we're hitting everything, and we decided to kind of do something similar, I guess, to where we did the top 100 animated characters and focus once again on characters. One thing that kind of came out of that record is throughout the 100 characters that we listed, most of them were good guys, or most of them were not necessarily what you would consider villains. We had very few villains show up on that list, so I guess this gives us a chance to highlight the villains, and of course this is the topic that you, the fans, voted for. So we gave you a variety of choices, and this is the one that you wanted to see from us next, so we're just following your guys' orders. And with me to help count down this first section of all-time villains is Steve Megatron Phillips. Hello.
Hello, hello.
And we also have, from the Geekcast Radio Network, Talking in Circles and Cinema Geeks, MovieRevolt Dan. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Not too bad. And of course, our resident top 100 guest, Mr. DJ Valentine. Hello.
In the immortal words of one of my favorite villains, I'm an exceptional thief, Mrs. McLean, and seeing that I'm moving up to kidnapping, you should be more polite.
I like it. We're starting with quotes already. We might hear a few more of those throughout this countdown. So if you have never listened to a top 100 before, like we said, please go back and listen to some of those other ones. But how it usually works is we invite a whole bunch of different people to participate, people that write blogs, people that are part of podcasts or various things like that, friends of the network, and they all basically compile their own top 100 or top 50. They submit them all to us. We compile all that data, and through that we come up with an overall top 100 list based on points and all kinds of other math and all that kind of stuff. So we have a lot of people that participated this year in this countdown, so I want to give them all a little bit of credit up front. We'll try to highlight them throughout the weeks here on the episodes. Also on the Facebook and the Twitter page, we'll be pimping out their various shows and websites, etc. So obviously the four of us have all provided lists, and in addition to that, we've also had one list provided from the Behind the Voice Actors website, one from our friend over at Pop Culture Case Study, Dave. We've had a list submitted by the podcast network / podcast Following Films. Toon Master Tim, who's been a guest and a host on some of the Geekcast radio shows, has also provided a list. DJ, your cohorts also did an ensemble list over at Simplistic Reviews that made
They did.
some head, and then you had your own personal list. So I like it. We get the group and the individual representation. So that's good.
They kicked me out, so I have to make my own.
We also have JD Duran and the In Session Film podcast provided a list. We have Fridley Cent and Hard Candy Mandy, our other co-host of the Cinema Geeks. We had TV's Mr. Neil, who's obviously been on some of these past countdowns, as well as longtime Geekcast radio contributor JT from Saskatoon. Dan, there was more, though, so who else helped us come up with this overall list?
We also had the Mild-Mannered Movie Men, and as well as the Countdown podcast, which it seems to correspond pretty perfectly with this project. Besotted Geek, which you can also find in Nerdly, which Cinema Geeks and has had some partnerships with, as well as Geekcast Radio, and also Kevin Wright stuff. He's done a lot of online reviews for movies and things of that nature. Would highly recommend. Blockbusters, Kristen McCarthy, who does the board game reviews for Geekcast Radio, and last but David Baraffi, who has contributed, I think, to the last two lists. He is an entertainment blogger, does a lot of great reviews on his website on a number of different topics, specifically mostly films, but some other things as well. So some good countdowns and things of that nature. And we'll put, as Kevin mentioned, we'll be listing all these people on the Geekcast Radio site. So you can check out their stuff. A lot of great podcasts and websites and blogs to read and listen to. So
yeah, for
stuff.
Sure. A lot of good content if you check out a bunch of these. Hopefully I didn't forget anybody. I think I might have forgot to mention Eduardo, who's also been on a bunch of the Geekcast Radio shows with TFG and Mike, etc. So if I forgot anybody else, I apologize, but we'll hit you at some point along the way, and we'll definitely publish your stuff so that people can check out your content as well. And we definitely appreciate everybody that provides the list, because the more people that provide lists, the less bias we have, and the better overall list is what we've seen over time. So one thing that we will be looking as we go through here is we'll be kind of looking to see what kind of trends we see, what kind of genres are more represented, because obviously villains, this is kind of wide open. It was just fictional villains, so it could be coming from written text, novels and things like that, books. It could be coming from film. They could be some cartoon villains that sneak in, comic books. So there's a TV villains. There's a lot of different places that these villains could come from. So we'll be kind of keeping track of that a little bit. Also, like we always do, we'll kind of be keeping track of which decades are most represented. A couple other things I decided to look at too in this countdown was to see, as far as, now some of these villains have only been represented or portrayed by one person if they were on TV or movies or something. Some of them have had various people play them. So I looked to see if there was any actors that were kind of repeated throughout the list that played multiple villains that we'll see. So we'll see if any of those guys come up. Also, I also listed who created the villain. So who was the initial creator of the villain? And let's see if there was a king out there as far as the best villain creator, because I got there's almost at least 10 people that created multiple villains that will show up on this top 100. So that's something to look for as well. So we'll kind of be keeping track of all of those things. Overall, we had over 630 individual villains that at least received one vote. So from 630 plus down to 100 is the only ones that we'll be talking about. And I think one thing that we have to get out of the way real quick before we kind of get into the meat of the countdown is some criteria that you guys used, and how do we whittle this down? Because one thing that we've been doing is we've been posting these matchups on Facebook to kind of get everybody thinking in the right mindset to kind of bridge the gap from the Wars tournament with the 90s cartoon villains up until when we started this. And I've seen a lot of comments on questioning whether someone was a villain or not, or I don't view that person as a villain, or kind of the difference between an antagonist and a villain, and different things like that. So we'll start with you, DJ, since you're the guest. But what kind of criteria do you use when you're trying to come up with just 100 villains out of the thousands that have existed?
Glad you asked. No, I focused on past exploits, capability, and overall goals. Now, if you look at my slideshow presentation, wait, I don't have no slideshow presentation. Okay, fine. No, I just went on those three things essentially. Just if they've done something super villainous in their history, how capable of a villain are they, and what is their overall mission? Is essentially how I whittled down my list.
Excellent, Dan. Another question that I kind of was thinking of as they were posting some of those matchups were: is the more evil a character is, does that also coincide with the higher that they should be ranked as a villain? Or is it more like what DJ's maybe saying about some of the goals and some of their accomplishments? Or how do you kind of, balance those things?
For me, I went with the quality of the character, or how interested I become in reading about that character. Because there can be some villains that have done some really evil things, but ultimately they're not that enthralling to kind of read or watch or what have you. So I didn't really consider those elements when I was trying to rank my list. I kind of ranked them based upon the quality of the villain. And for me, that depends on a few things. Part of that is, someone who is super evil and can do some crazy things that makes you interested. Some of that is someone who you like their motivations behind what they're doing are unique, or help them stand out from the crowd, or you've been able to see them develop in different ways throughout the years. Some characters, it's a little bit more difficult to do that because you're talking about like a movie compared to like a character in a comic that's been around for 40 years. But ultimately, that's what I tried to rank my list, was on how much interested I am. If like I'm reading a story and you give me a list of these villains, which one am I going to gravitate to want to read first?
Excellent. That makes sense a lot. Steve, a question for you. I mentioned that some of these villains have only been portrayed one time, or maybe they've never been, they've just existed in a book and maybe never been on the TV or the silver screen and stuff like that. Does the number of times a villain has popped up again and again and again, does that mean for you that it should be ranked higher if it's kind of stayed the test of time and been adapted multiple times versus maybe something that was more of a one-off?
I definitely think so, but I think also too it kind of depends on how villainous they actually are. Mm-hmm. For me, like obviously the longer they've been in existence and the more that they've been used, the better off they were in my personal rankings. But also at the same time, I had plenty of one-off villains that were strictly in like one film or one show and were never seen again, and yet I listed them because, they were iconic characters nonetheless. And so I felt that they still deserve to be in the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And another interesting thing to kind of look at as we go through this is how multiple villains that appear in the same type of work or the same franchise or the same property, how that will work out. Did people just rank the best of the best in that property, or was there room for multiple, things like that? And speaking of that, just real quick, last kind of thing before we get into the countdown, DJ, any predictions as far as where we're going to see the most villains coming from like a source perspective? I mean, do you we kind of talked about this a little bit on Twitter early on as people were forming lists and coming up with stuff. You have your horror villains, your comic book villains, your movie villains. Do you expect one to kind of be more represented than the other?
I mean, just because it's built for this, I think comic books and superhero movies sort of thing, which essentially is a offset of comic books, are going to have the most horror, probably second, mainly because Spider-Man has like 10 great villains. So, and that's one character and his rogues gallery. Horror, there's villains in there, but there's kind of like a Mount Rushmore and everything. Like it's a very steep decline after like the top four. So I'm thinking after, if I had to put my money on who's going to get represented the most, I think comic books.
All right, excellent. And Dan, any bias that you think might be shown throughout this list, or since it's such a broad category, do you think this is maybe one of our countdowns that might be a little bit bias-free?
Oh, it'll never be bias-free. That's impossible. I think DJ makes a good point. I think you're going to see, being a geek list, and though I think we did branch out, you're going to see that impact, and I think he's right in the sense of you'll see a lot of comic books, especially because there are so many comic book villains. More so than that, and I think one thing it's hard to get away from is recency bias, where there are some like villains that are in classics, from Shakespeare to epics of yesteryear, where some people may have not have read those or were interested in those, so they may rank something that's come out more recent over something that's classic, which is something that's hard to avoid, but I think it's kind of what we've seen throughout each list that we've done.
Yeah, and different lists have kind of shown different biases over time, because we've definitely had our list that showed like a 90s bias. I think a little bit in the animated films, there was definitely a huge portion of 90s animated films. We've also seen different things like comic books and stuff like that pop up. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what comes up along the way here. Just for business purposes here, the last couple things we need to get out of the way. If there was a tie, as far as the points that a character got, the winner of that tie was whoever appeared on more lists. So if you appeared on more lists, you got the bump over the person that you were tied with. So we had over 25 lists that were submitted, and this section just can give you guys a sneak peek. The characters that show up in this first set of 25, 100 through 76, they would have appeared in somewhere between about 20 to 40% of the list. So most of them in that 20 to probably 32% range. A few get all the way up to 40%. So that's kind of what this section consists of. And when I list source, just so nobody gets up in arms, I tried where I could the best to come up with the original source. So I know a lot of times people are going to say, oh, that character was from a movie or whatnot, but if they appeared in a book first, then I'm going to list the book as the source of the original of character. So just bear with me, because otherwise it kind of gets confusing, as a lot of characters have appeared in multiple sources. So, all right, are we ready, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right, so starting off this top 100 fictional villains in the 100th spot, in the 300-point range, we're actually going to go to a TV villain. He appeared on 28% of the list, and that is Ben Linus from the show Lost. So, starting off at number 100, like I said, appeared on 28% of the list. Nobody had him higher than 34. Dan, what do you think about a TV villain starting this countdown off?
Interesting. I know. I did wonder, like, with a character like Ben Linus, I know there's a lot of negative feelings towards the way Lost ended, and sometimes when that happens, a character is negatively impacted by that. So maybe if people had better feelings towards that show and like how it and its results, maybe he would be higher. But yeah, it's surprising. I feel like Lost was one of like the biggest show ever, but no one really talks about it anymore. So it's interesting seeing him show up here. I'm not an avid Lost fan, so I can't provide a lot of detail into it. But my wife was big into it, so I've kind of watched it by proxy, and I know the person, the actor, I think who was quite good. And very freaky in the sense he seemed kind of evil. He had that presence to him. So, the kind of surprise for me for number 100.
Yeah,
got to play the Joker too. He played the Joker in the Dark Knight Returns animated series because Roland, is his name Emerson?
Yeah, Michael Emerson.
Michael Emerson. Yeah.
Yep, he played the Joker in that.
Yep. So he originally appeared, obviously, in the TV series in 2006, played by Michael Emerson. I'll give the creation credits, I guess, to J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof. But a lot of us had him in the people that ranked him mostly had him in the 40s. So we had someone have him at 44. Someone had it at 48. DJ, you had it at 47. I also had him at 48. So what do you think? Is he deserving of top 100, DJ?
I'm one of those people that Dan's talking about. That when I got to the end of Lost, I was like, "What the hell is that?" So, but what I do remember from Lost, what I always take away from Lost is Smoke Monster. I hate Benjamin Linus. So, I mean, of all the TV villains out there, he's, I guess, for me, he's iconic just for the simple fact hated him. If you're making me hate you, you're doing your job correctly, because most times you get these villains and you're like, whatever. Or you fall in love with them, which is not always a negative thing, but Benjamin Linus was just so good at being bad. I mean, how many times, if you watch this show, has Benjamin Linus get punched in the face and you're just like, yes, I hate him. So
I will say too that he is a piece that's so critical to that series. Like without that character, that series just falls apart. I mean, obviously that's part of the writing as well, but I mean, he's just so crucial to making that series work for those that it worked for. So I think that kind of gives him some credit too. But I'll have to see. Interesting pick as far as TV villains, and maybe Dan's onto something with some recency bias. We'll have to see if that kind of continues or not. Going into our next pick, we actually do have our first tie. So there will be a tiebreaker here because one of them did appear on 32% of the list, where the other one only appeared on 24%. So 99 spot, we're going from the world of TV to the world of film. Interesting what kind of conversation you guys think this will kind of spawn off, and what it will make you think of the rest of this property. Number 99 from the world of Star Wars.
Ooh.
Darth Maul.
Oh,
okay. I was like,
whoa, what is happening here? Stop the train, I want to get off. What the hell?
So from the 1999 film played by Ray Park, created by George Lucas, Darth Maul at our number 99 spot, not another Darth. But let's start with you, Steve. If Darth Maul is finding its way into the countdown at number 99, first of all, does he deserve that? And second, how many Star Wars characters does that mean we're going to see during this countdown?
Well, I think that he's well warranted, being that he was quite possibly the what should have been, like, theoretically in George Lucas's mind, the first villain that we should have seen. And he was pretty hardcore with the fact he had the double-edged lightsaber and took out Qui-Gon. It was just sad he didn't make it beyond the film unless you're going animated series route. But I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of glad he hit the top 100 because he is a pretty hardcore villain, although he didn't really say much. literally. But no, I mean, I think we're going to definitely see more. You'll probably see for sure Darth Vader probably close to in the top 25, and then you'll see Emperor Palpatine somewhere there, thereabout, out of the villains, and I'm sure somebody will put Boba Fett, and somebody else will put some of the other characters like that. But I definitely think he's warranted.
DJ, is he the front runner for the best idea and for a villain that didn't get to actually use it?
The most squandered villain of all time. I mean, Darth Maul, it's isn't even arguable. He's the best part of the Phantom Menace, pretty much, but they never really use him. Most of his, like you guys were saying, most of his character got built up on the animated series. Like, if you take into account Rebels and the Clone Wars, Darth Maul is a really fleshed out villain, but in the movie, he's an idea, essentially. He's just like, okay, he's dark side epitome. So for him to jump this high is essentially because he is the most stylish thing coming out of that movie, other than sand and Jar Jar Binks. So for him to make it be on this list is surprising to me, because I thought that he would just get washed away, because again, most people don't watch in the whole litany Rebels, or know about him coming back in Rebels or the Clone Wars. I just remember him from the movie, and he says 5 words in that entire film. So
another thing that I was thinking too, as to why I'm somewhat surprised that he's on the list, is as far as I'm going, when I'm trying to rank all of these, I only have 100 spots, and there's so many different franchises, there's so many different, thousands of different villains to choose from. A lot of times you kind of go with whatever, the top 1 or 2 from each grouping that you kind of go with, and I would have thought a lot of people would have left him off. Dan, are you surprised that he is the first Star Wars character that appears on the list?
Honestly, no. I know there's a lot of people who really love Darth Maul. And yeah, a lot of it is due to the fact that he's just a really well-designed character, like in the aesthetic aspect of him. But I do know, that people who have a fondness for that character is often based upon the extended universe that has been able to flesh him out, either through the novels or through the comics or through the TV show. So, I think there was much more to his character, and probably in hindsight should have stayed maybe around a little bit longer. I don't think some of the ones that we talked about we might see. I don't know a lot of people that are huge fans of Emperor Palpatine. I could be wrong.
I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I know there are.
What are you talking about, Dan? Everyone loves me.
I think Maul has more of a following, surprisingly enough. I could be wrong. But I think we'll probably see more Star Wars characters, of course. But
Palpatine, I think, was more of a villain than Maul, because Maul was more of a lackey, and Palpatine had a lot of cannon fodder throughout the film, the first 3 of the new trilogy films. So it
could depend too on what people go with, because Maul is the more recent one in a way, I guess, as far as a big time villain, because Palpatine was playing more of a central role as far as the Emperor goes in the original trilogy, but Palpatine definitely had more screen time. So
do what must be done.
Do it. I mean, he might be more villainous than Vader. Vader's essentially his lackey too. He's essentially Darth Maul 3.0 if you count Grievous or whatever. I mean, Vader is really only arch in Empire. He's kind of like a lackey in the first one, A New Hope. Then he's very villainous in Empire, and then he's kind of like a beaten down man in the third one.
Right.
Yeah.
Palpatine is the main, he's the Phantom Menace.
Well, maybe Darth Vader's appearance in The Force Awakens, or Rogue One, will boost him a little bit.
I almost forgot about that. Where he just says,
that was awesome. That was the best part of that whole film.
The highest rank that Darth Maul got was all the way up to number 17 on one individual's list, but like I said, only on 24% of the list, which meant that he lost the tiebreaker to the other person with the same amount of points that was on 32% of the list. We're going to go to our first animated villain. So from the world of cartoons and going all the way back into the 1950s, let's do number 98 with Boris and Natasha.
Boris, darling, your plan worked. Moose and Squirrel are out of the way at last.
You said it, Guido.
From Bullwinkle. Rocky and Bullwinkle villains coming in here. So I didn't know if the cartoon villains would get much love here. We already did a whole cartoon, animated characters listing. But we have one sneaking in here at number 98. Dan, what do you think? Will we see very few of these types of villains in the animated world, or is this just the tip of the iceberg?
What's kind of crazy is like they didn't even make the top 100 animated characters list, but they're making the villains list, which is weird. Like it's just, I know we have different people doing, like we have had not the exact same, but it's kind of interesting.
Maybe we champion them enough during that to like boost their status.
Exactly, that's possible. That's possible. Oh man, that's surprising. Like I didn't think they would make it.
Did you give a listing to Putin? Is that what happened here? What?
We did have our first individual that nailed it. So David Baruffi actually had this at 98, and that's where it came in at. Dan, you were the highest, or no, I'm sorry, I was the highest ranker of Boris and Natasha. So maybe I was trying to give him a little extra love, but I just thought out of cartoon villains, like if there was one that should be on there for me, it was Boris and Natasha. So they kind of got that slot for me. Steve, what do you think?
I kind of get it. I mean, they were kind of the original baddies of animation back in the yesteryear, and so with the show that our parents grew up with, it's kind of and even ourselves, like I mean, it's kind of one of those villain sets that kind of still stand the test of time, even though the series don't really have any prominent resurgence.
Right. So, first cartoon villain. We'll see if there's any other ones or not. But Boris and Natasha finding redemption for not being as a part of the other list, finding their way into this list. So that's interesting. We had 6 picks that the lowest that you could have got as far as representation on the submitted list would have been 20%. So you had to be at least on 20% of the list. We have 6 of those characters that are at that bottom mark, and that's where we're going next with our number 97 spot. Back to the world of film. I don't know if this is recency biased or not, but 2012 film character from the world of Quentin Tarantino. We're going to go with Calvin Candy, as played by Leonardo DiCaprio. DJ, you had a reaction there. So what do you think about Calvin Candy's status as a villain?
I keep thinking about, when I think about Calvin Candy, I think about how Will Smith was going to be in this movie, but he was angry. He didn't want it because he didn't get to kill the villain. Spoiler alert, because, what's his name? Christoph Waltz kills Calvin Candy. But what I realized coming out of Django is that Calvin Candy isn't the main villain in the movie. The main villain in the movie to me is Steven, played by Samuel L. Jackson, right, who Will Smith would have got to kill if he had to stay in the role. But Calvin Candy is a great character, but essentially he takes his cues from Steven the whole time. He was, oh, really? If it was a snake, it would have jumped up and bit me, But he's very arch. He's very good. He's very high. I would think of a top 100. Calvin Candy jumping this high to me is a little bit of a reach, but I do love the character. I mean, it's Quentin Tarantino, so.
And obviously, like I said, if you're on a low percentage like this, only 20%, that means the people that did ranked you fairly high. So we had 2 people that put him in the top 20. Dan, what do you think?
I love Leo.
What do you think about the Leonardo DiCaprio love, Dan?
Yeah, I don't think I necessarily agree with it all that much. Like, I just think that if you're just in the realm of movies or even Western villains, I don't necessarily think I would rank him that high, or even, so I think, I know we're only at 90 in the 90s, late 90s, but I still, I don't know. I don't think he's top 100 worthy per se. He's a great character. I love that movie, but I don't necessarily think that there's, like I said, I think as DJ mentioned, he's a character that is more interesting based upon who's around him rather than the character himself. I mean, it's a great performance by DiCaprio, don't get me wrong. So I don't know. It just seems like when I think of great villains, he's not one that really comes to mind, even just looking at recent films.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he would rank even amongst just the Tarantino villains and where you would put him. So I don't know what that says about what we could or could not expect for the rest of the way. One thing that you will notice if this is your first time listening to one of these top 100s is what we've kind of noticed over time is this first section of 20 to 25 that we go over is very much influenced by some people that have these people really high. So, just a real passion for one of these characters by 1 or 2, 3, 4 of the people that are submitting lists can really influence this section of the countdown much more than they'll be able to influence later on, where you have to be on a majority of the list, etc. So sometimes, a little bit more of personal favorites can sneak their way into this section of the countdown. So that may be a case here with Calvin Candy. So let's move on to number 96. He was on 32% of the list, and I guess if you want to be technical, the source material would be from a novel, not from a film. We're going to go with Saruman from J.R.R. Tolkien's novels, The Hobbit / Lord of the Rings. So obviously probably most known through the films, but originally from the novel. So a Lord of the Rings character, obviously played by Christopher Lee in the films here. Dan, you and I both had this one at 99, and he comes in at 96. So we'll start with you. Did we get this one somewhat right?
I think so. I think Lord of the Rings has a lot of villains, but I think he is kind of the person that really drives a lot of it, especially in the first 2 stories. It helps when you're played by one of the best villain actors of all time. I think that certainly ups your status a little bit. So, and you do get the fact that there is some development with that character in the sense that he's someone who kind of turned evil for certain ways, or at least at one time wasn't as openly evil as he becomes in the trilogy. Yeah. So, and his relationship with Gandalf is, I think, one of my favorite parts of that franchise. So yeah, I'm happy to see that he made the top 100.
DJ, Dan said that he's played by one of the best villain actors that we've known as far as film goes in Christopher Lee. Does that mean that we should see, without naming names, are we going to see more Christopher Lee villains on this countdown?
We may. I mean, I'm really partial to when he happened to play with a special piece of hardware that was gold. But yeah, Christopher Lee is freaking amazing, man. You go through his catalog of stuff he's played. Saruman, only thing I didn't like about him is that we never really got, I didn't read the book, so I apologize, Lord of the Rings fans, why he turned. We saw how he turned, where he's like, I'll go chase after Sauron. And I never got like the whole thing, so that kind of weakens him for me as a villain. But I mean, it's Christopher Lee. I can listen to that man read, my parole hearing papers. I don't care. Christopher Lee's awesome. So yeah, I'm glad he's on the list. I'm sure we'll probably get another character of his.
All right, Steve, what do you think of Lord of the Rings making an appearance here on the countdown?
I can't say I'm entirely surprised, because Lord of the Rings, whether you've read the novel or watched the films, has kind of encompassed the better part of the last 20 years in film anyway, between Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So I'm kind of not surprised that something from that franchise showed up already. Yeah, as for Christopher Lee, I'm not really surprised either, because pretty much anytime you have a British villain, they're pretty hardcore.
All right, and we'll have to see if that's the only character from that series of novels, films that we see, or what, as far as Lord of the Rings goes. We also have another tie coming up in our 94-95 spots, and they're only separated by a small percent, 20% and 24%. So I wasn't sure if we would get much representation from this type of source material, but at number 95, we're going to get a character that is from a video game. So interesting from that aspect, originated, I guess, in a 1997 video game. Hopefully you guys know more about this series than I do, but this would be Sephiroth, I believe, from the Final Fantasy games. So DJ, what do you think of a video game villain coming in, and is this the right one if it's one of the few that we get?
I had my roommate in college. He was addicted to Final Fantasy, this version. And this is the only reason I know Sephiroth, because he had this big freaking sword, and you fought Cloud, and he's essentially like this evil angel looking dude. According to his backstory, I'm not 100% certain, but that game was like, when I think of Final Fantasy, I think of that game with him in it. So if it's gonna be him, I mean, I can think of many more bad guys from video games I would put over Sephiroth. But again, Final Fantasy is a freaking phenomenon. So and he's probably the most iconic villain in the entirety of the franchise. So I can understand it a little bit, but it's still a little high for.
Isn't that the most iconic game in the franchise anyway? And they keep trying to remake it.
Right. That's all I remember. Every time somebody says Final Fantasy to me, I think of Cloud, Sephiroth, and Chocoboos. That's all I remember from that entire thing. So,
like I said, tied for the lowest as far as the percentage of lists that he actually appeared in. What got him here is every single person that did list him had him in their top 50. So that's what helped. Nobody had him from 50 to 100. Dan, what do you think? A video game character, is this a deserving one, or how many video game characters might we see?
I have no idea if he's deserving. I've never played Final Fantasy in my life, so I can't really speak to that. I don't know. Like I don't know a lot of great video game villains, but I also think stopped before like that was really a thing. Donkey Kong, trying to rescue the princess from the castle is not
Bowser.
Bowser's not the
Dr.
most
Wily.
complex character in the world. But I know there's games have far more developed since then, especially in the last 10 years or so. So I know there's a couple that come to mind that just doing research and looking at lists of villains specifically for video games. The one that came up here, I honestly didn't see in my research, so that makes me wonder what other villains might possibly make it within video games. So I think it's kind of cool that we're seeing a video game character, because I was kind of worried there would be not that much representation from that medium. So hopefully that means there'll be more.
And I think you hit something on the nose there too when it comes to video game characters, is that they could be a bearing or a barometer, I guess, on how people judge their list. Granted, there's a big difference between video game characters in the last 10 to 15 years compared to the decades before that. But if we were getting a lot of characters from like 80s and 90s video games, like that means that people voted more on how well known they are, how maybe iconic they are, that type of thing. Whereas if you get some from more recent times, maybe they had a little bit more development as an actual character. But I'm not a big video game knowledgeable person when it comes, especially to the last couple of decades. So, Steve, what do you think of Sephiroth making the top 100?
I don't think that this was really a worthy throw-in. At least for video game villains, there's probably quite a few alternatives that they could have used. I remember this game just vaguely from back in the day when I was playing emulator games, and it was the days of dial-up, and and I was sitting there on my Pentium 300 at the time playing these games, and so like I had little interest in PlayStation games at the time. So my friend loved it, but other than that, I don't know. I don't think it was. I think the people that are voting for it, it's like one of those cult favorite things, and it's not really one of those mainstream voting. It's because they're like diehard fans of the franchise.
Yeah, that definitely could be. We had one person. Actually, the last two picks have been our first two picks that were in somebody's top 10. So Saruman was actually in JT from Saskatoon's top 10, and Sephiroth was in Blockbuster's top 10. So first time we've seen two top 10s characters fall on the countdown. Beating him out in that tiebreaker is a character that couldn't be any farther from Sephiroth, I don't think. Also, going into territory we haven't been yet, because up to this point, getting to number 94, we have not had a character that originated in the 80s. So let's go to our first 80s villain from a film famously played by Dennis Hopper, a David Lynch film. We're going to go with Frank Booth for our number 94 pick. DJ, what do you think about the first 80s pick being Frank Booth?
Heineken? No. I know why this is up here, because my co-host Matthew Stewart, this is his favorite character of all time. He loves. We were on a podcast the other day talking about this character. So yeah, Dennis Hopper. Again, Blue Velvet is one of those movies I have not seen as much as I should. But that character is just so, you think of that movie, he is that character, and he is nuts. Dennis Hopper, yes. The character, a little less nuts, but yeah.
Dennis Hopper obviously does play a pretty good villain in various films as well.
Correct. Correct.
Two people had him in the top 20, including, like you said, your friends or the conglomerate simplistic reviews, also following film. So obviously some film love for a character like Frank Booth.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, what do you think of Frank Booth making the list? He was not on your list or mine.
No, I know this is sacrilegious, but like David Lynch is one of those directors that I can respect, but I really don't at all enjoy watching his movies or products.
Terrence Malick's another one.
Yeah, I can do Terrence Malick depending on the movie, but David Lynch, I can see what people get, but I'm just like, this is not something I enjoy. So, I've actually not seen Blue Velvet, so I've seen other, Elephant Man, I know, which is more of his contemporary, more of like a general film that he tried to prove, but like watching Twin Peaks and things like that, I'm like, this is or Mulholland Drive, they just never really worked for me, so I never had the motivation to watch to watch it. So maybe I will now, knowing that he made the top 100. But I do know when looking at like top villains in films, Frank Booth was one that's often mentioned as one that should be listed. So
yeah, he was on a quarter of the list, 24% basically. But people were all over the map on him. Some people, there was a group of people that had him in like the 15 to 30 range. There was another group of people that had him in like the 60 to 75 range. So people were all over the map on Frank Booth. So I think it kind of depends on people that are either fans or not fans of David Lynch, maybe, as Dan was stating. So there's our choice for number 94. We're going to stay in the 80s for back-to-back 80s picks for number 93. We actually had this character featured in one of our Facebook matchups. I am actually surprised that he has made the top 100, but up to this point, he has been on the most lists. So 40% of the list this character appeared on. We're going with a Dolph Lundgren character, Ivan Drago. So, DJ, what do you think? We had him in the matchup, and now he appears in the top 100. Some people were saying he's not a villain. Right. What do you think?
Yeah, I was one of those people, because I think at the end of course, yes, I'm sorry, Michael B. Jordan, he killed your father. But if you really rewatch Rocky 4, one of the greatest films of all time, you'll see that he's kind of manipulated by his wife and the Russian guy who's like his trainer / manager, and at the end Ivan's like fights him. he like breaks character. It's like, nah, screw you, I fight for me. So he's kind of like manipulated. But again, when it comes to iconography, I mean, Ivan Drago is a icon of sports movies, of villainous movies. Just the look, Dolph Lundgren. That's the first time I ever seen Dolph Lundgren. I thought they made him in a lab for real, because he looked like a freaking he looked like he's 25 feet taller than Sylvester Stallone. Actually bruised Sylvester Stallone's heart during filming of that movie. So yes, Ivan Drago, I can understand him being on this list. I can see it, because when you think of Rocky, it doesn't take that many moves before you get to Ivan Drago.
Dan, it wasn't the how high people had him ranked. It was strictly the number of lists that he appeared on. So appearing on 40% of the list is enough, because a lot of people didn't necessarily have him too high. We had 3 people that had him in the 90s. Someone had him at 92. Somebody had him at 97. My better half, Amanda, was closest. She only had it one off. She had him at 94. So is it just more of the universal knowledge of who he is and kind of the iconic, status that he has that got him up there? Because nobody had him. Only one or two people had him in the top, even 40.
Well, considering Boris and Natasha made this list, and now Ivan Drago, are we sure the Russians did not get to the top 100?
Putin got to this list.
I'm a little concerned. I think then, like DJ mentioned, Ivan Drago is one of he is an archetype basically that you've seen a lot, and he kind of does represent a lot of, when you think of 80s movie villains and the stereotypical Russian character, that was very much what he represented, and Dolph Lundgren, Dolph Lundgren did play that character really well. I think there is everyone knows he's got classic lines, people know who he is, and I think a lot of people, that's where he probably did succeed, because he's a popular character that people are aware of. So when you're just thinking of movie villains off the top of your head, he's probably going to be there someplace. So I'm surprised he made the list, honestly. I'm not all that torn up about it. I do like that. I mean, it's a fun film. It's not going to change the world besides ending the Cold War. but still.
Hey, if you can change, Dan, then we can change. We all can change.
Exactly. So,
Interesting, too, that it's coming after characters like Sephiroth and Frank Booth, who are very much more, I would say, well, and also more niche characters. Like, it's not going to be as universal. You're not going to have everybody that knows those characters and is familiar with them. And then we get Ivan Drago, who's on 40% of the list. Just as a trivia here, nobody today is going to be on more lists than Ivan Drago was on. So at 93, he is on a higher percentage of lists than everybody else will get through, all the way up through 76 today. So
He killed Apollo Creed, man. He killed Apollo Creed.
a lot of universal love for Ivan Drago. Steve, what do you think of a Rocky villain showing up? Is he really a villain? He's just a competitor. In a way.
I think he's just a competitor that I don't really see him as like a villain per se. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, yeah, every one of the Rocky films had somebody that he went against, and yeah, that particular one did kill somebody, but still.
What did you say,
He did
DJ, on
murder
Facebook?
somebody in cold blood.
Murder is is that the number one form of villainy?
Yeah,
I think it depends on their number of murders. So that would put Palpatine at the top because
he's killed
Order 66.
so many people.
Right. So
that purge.
Sometimes I guess some people are more lenient on murder than others. I don't know. But let's go on to number 92. It's been a while since our first pick that we went to the world of television. So I am going to be leaning heavily on DJ and Dan on this because you guys are much more of the experts than I am on modern TV. So we're going to go to a TV character from 2010 played by Walter Goggins, and that would be Boyd Crowder from Justified. So
nice.
Dan, you had him at 34. And DJ, you had him at 15, so you had him at higher than anybody else. So what do you think of your boy Boyd Crowder coming in at 92?
Well, first, a television is a device in which you watch programs on. I'm joking. No. Boyd Crowder, to me, when I watch that show, I'm a huge Elmore Leonard fan. He's based on the Elmore Leonard short story. I always call him Redneck Joker because the way that show Justified set up with Timothy Olyphant, he's kind of like the lawman, and his antithesis is Walton Goggins' Boyd Crowder, who is essentially just chaos on that show. And the thing about it is he becomes so likable, and this is a man with a swastika on his arm that he essentially got just to survive through prison. This guy has done horrible things, but whenever he deals with the villain, it's like they're on equal footing. He seems on looking at him that he's dumb, but he's probably the smartest character on the show. He's just so good. There's so many layers that Walton Goggins does for that character that I loved and that I had not seen on television for a television villain before. Like Emerson for Lost, he's doing the kind of the predictable I'm smart villain. Boyd Crowder is the unpredictable smart villain, which I had not seen before. So, yes, Boyd Crowder was really high for me.
Yeah, we had him all over the map. We had somebody, obviously, DJ, you had him in the top 15. We had somebody had him in the top 25, Dan 34, somebody 45, 60, 70. So he was all over the place. A lot of times during this part of the countdown, it's just whether someone's top 100 worthy or not. Occasionally, though, Dan, it's about not just are they worthy or not, or are they too high or too low. What do you think? Are you just happy that Boyd Crowder made the countdown?
I am, honestly, because Justified wasn't the most popular show in the world. I know there was a lot of fans like DJ and myself who did really enjoy it, but I didn't know if he would actually make the list. So I'm very, very happy that he did, and I think too, the development of that character was amazing. Like if you look at the first episode of Justified, he actually comes off as not the greatest character in the world. He's really over the top in the first episode, but it really changes moving on. And I felt like every season they found a new way to approach that character. There was a season where he kind of finds religion and tries to turn good, and kind of the ebb and flow of him and the relationship he has with Timothy Olyphant's character. So yeah, I think that I love Justified, and he's a big reason why in that show, and just the way they were able to kind of keep his character continuously fresh and original. But also like there is always that kind of like that almost like Boy Crowder luck where something he'd get out of things but always find himself in new trouble. So it kept the show really fun throughout.
And the hero couldn't. I call it the Batman Joker situation where Batman really should get rid of this character, but he can't because there's such a connection between them where they're equals. It's just the dynamic of the character to the hero was just so good.
Yeah,
and how their backgrounds kind of connected, and they're basically coming from the same place. Yeah, we could probably talk about Justified for the next hour if they want us to.
Justified talk.
It will be interesting, definitely, to see here, which TV shows get represented and which ones don't, and if the time period they aired has any types of bearing on that or not. So far we've gotten Lost and Justified, a 2006 and 2010 TV show. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that as we go forward. Let's go back into the world of film. Most people will know him more from a film, even though I guess technically, again, original source would become from a novel. Our number 91 pick, I guess it's fitting that he made it this year where there's a rejuvenation of this franchise, I guess, in the film world. We're going to go to Roy Batty from the Blade Runner franchise, originally appearing in the 1968 novel, then obviously the film, and now a reboot of the film, or a sequel, I guess, if you want to call it that. So Roy Batty from Blade Runner coming in at number 91. He was in the top 10 for real films on their countdown. Dan, what do you think of Roy Batty? And in the film world, is he worthy of fitting into this top 100?
Man, I'm not the biggest Blade Runner expert. I know it's sacrilegious. I actually haven't even seen the sequel as of today.
How dare you? No, I'm joking.
I know. It's evil. So, and I've only seen the first Blade Runner once, and it was a while ago. But I do know, like, he does have that infamous soliloquy, and if you look for more of a sympathetic character that does have layers, he is one that does fit that mold. So, and it is a situation that turns him evil or what have you. So I don't know. I feel like I am not one to be able to judge based upon my limited experience if he's top 100 worthy or not. So, but I do know, just based upon reputation, it's a really highly regarded character. So
don't worry, it's not just you that is not maybe as familiar with Roy Batty, because a lot of people, or maybe just people, just didn't think he was worthy, because he does not appear on a lot of lists, but very high on the ones that he did. And this one might be one where, we have a variety of people that are submitting lists here. Some have more of a geek-centric background, some comic books, some film. He definitely resonated with a lot of the film crowd. So Pop Culture Case Study, Following Films, Mild-Mannered Movie Men, and Real Films particularly all ranked him, and 3 of them have him in the top 16. Obviously, 1 in the top 10. So, DJ, is this just something that those that do like Blade Runner really enjoy this character, even if he might not have as universal love, okay, at least according to our group?
I love Blade Runner, and I love this. The sequel is my favorite movie of the year so far. So the thing about Batty, it might be because, to me, I never even considered him because he's Frankenstein's monster. It's like I wouldn't put Frankenstein on this list for the simple fact that it's kind of what he's doing isn't really super villainous. He's more like, I don't even know how to
save himself.
Save himself. It's like he's more like, I can't even say he's an antagonist. He's just trying to live. Like his goals aren't to take over the world or destroy the Tyrell Corporation. He just wants to extend his life. And honestly, at the end of the film, he has every right to F up Harrison Ford. He just shot his girl in front of him. And at the end of the day, he saves them. Spoiler alert. And gives one of the greatest speeches in cinematic history that we've mocked on our show. So I can understand people leaving him off because maybe they don't even look at him as a bad guy.
Yeah, I can see that too. Steve, what do you think of Roy Batty from Blade Runner being in this kind of the bottom 10, I guess, section?
I mean, I can kind of see it, but I kind of can't because, like was already mentioned, he's kind of not really that much of a villain. He's just a dude trying to extend his own lifespan and those like him. And so, I see him as trying to just better himself rather than trying to be evil or anything. It's just that he had to go through some rather unconventional methods to get to where he was hoping to get to and ultimately didn't. But this wasn't on my particular list either, but that was more so because when I submitted it originally, I had not seen the first film, and I was waiting until the second film was coming out so that I could see them both kind of back to back. I was not the biggest fan of either one of them, but I understood why they have what the following that they do. So.
Yeah, and I'm just glad that we got a couple minutes of discussion out of that, because none of the four of us have Roy Batty on our own personal list, so that could have been a ghost cricket section, but we did fairly well there. So Roy Batty joins Sephiroth and Calvin Candy as one of those on the least amount of lists on the entire countdown. So let's see where we go from here as we get to number 90, the last here in the 90s. And we're going to another character that originally appeared in a novel and then later in different TV specials, films, etc. Was actually part of one of the Facebook matchups we did just recently. No comments on it yet, though, so I don't know how people will feel about this one, or maybe we won't get as much conversation that I thought we would. But this is going to the world of C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. We're going with The White Witch on number 90. Also might be interesting maybe to see how many witches we have show up on the countdown. But yeah, The White Witch at number 90 on 28% of the list, originated all the way back in 1978. Dan, you had her on the list at number 65. Here we see her at number 90. What do you think?
I think that's fine. I actually really do enjoy the Narnia series. I loved the book as a kid, even the animated movie as a kid. Even though it, for some reason, scared me.
It scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, I don't know. Something about the animation just seemed really, really freaky. And I know there's a lot of witches when it comes to stories and things like that. And I don't necessarily, if the White Witch is all that brand new, but I think it's often just what she represents, and especially, C.S. Lewis, and he, is known that, Narnia is so deeply tied to biblical references, and I think she really fits into that well, and the way she kind of manipulates others throughout, and you definitely see what C.S. Lewis was going for. And when you have Tilda Swinton, is that correct? Playing
yes,
playing you in a movie, also a big bonus. She was great in that role, of course. So I think she really nailed that character. She may have been one of the best parts of that film. So, yeah, I do, like I said, she's not, I wouldn't say, if you're looking at originality, maybe that she doesn't have it, but I think it's a really strong archetype that's executed really well from a genius storyteller in C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, and I loved the series growing up, too. It was one of my favorite book series, and I absolutely loved I think it was BBC, the ones that did the films. I just was always bummed because they never did all of them. But the White Witch was just a character that scared the ever-loving crap out of me. Maybe it's just something about witches in films that scare me, because there's another one that scares me pretty hardcore, too. But we were all over the board on the White Witch. Somebody had him in the top 20, then I had him top 30. We had a couple people in the top 40, 70s, 90s, 60s, so all over the place on the White Witch. DJ or Steve, either one of you, do you feel like the White Witch is deserving of being on our list? And note, if you don't count Natasha with Boris and Natasha, this would be the first sole female on the list. I did not keep track of that, so I don't have the stats on how many males and females we're going to have, but this is the first, just by herself female.
My first, exposure to this was the movies, so I might not be the best person to ask, because I wasn't a big fan of the movies. I mean, I love Tilda Swinton; she's amazing. That movie to me was kind of iffy, but I know it's got the following from the novels, which I've never read, but I hear everybody goes, well, if you didn't like the movie, you read the books, because the books are 10 times better. So I can understand her being considered. I don't think she's top 100 worthy, but that's just me. Again, I'm coming at it from a novice perspective.
Steve, have you had a chance to see any of the movies or any of the stuff that the C.S. Lewis stuff that this is based off of?
I've seen the movies. I've not read the books. More so just because I saw it as kind of along the same lines of Lord of the Rings, so it just didn't really strike that chord with me as much of that much of a villainous streak for a lot of these. But I don't know if it's necessarily top 100 worthy. I would say maybe top 150 or something. But again, that just could be personal thought on that, but I don't think that it deserves here anyway.
Dan, just circling back to you just real quick, because I hadn't noticed that until I kind of was looking at it. But what do you think? Will women be sorely, underrepresented here, or is that just a sign of our entertainment world that we live in, or do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and we'll have a half dozen more to look forward to in this first half of the countdown?
I know that's actually something I try to consider when I was doing my list, and like specifically like looking out for best female villains, and I don't know if it's my own personal bias that I struggled to come up with stuff. I mean, I had a good number on my list, but still, like, I felt like it was probably 20% or so, and it kind of felt bad about that. But I'm like, I don't know if that's me or just a product of entertainment as a whole, so I don't know where the issue is, but I think we saw that with the animated characters. We didn't have a huge amount of female characters, and I honestly think that will probably be repeated here, and I'll probably see around the same percentage-wise. But, I mean, I hope it's better. I really do. But I do think it's probably going to be around the 20-something out of all the hundreds that we have.
So something else, I guess, that I'll have to do some statistics and kind of track as we go through this. Interesting when we head to our next pick, our number 89, because not only is this going to be the oldest character we've had so far, it's going to be the first character that appeared in 3 top 10s, and the first character that we've seen all the way up to somebody's number 2 pick. So interesting here. I did not think that we would have a representation of this kind as much as maybe we will. But here at number 89, we're going to a Shakespeare villain. And we're going all the way back to the 1600s for Iago.
Boring! This is boring!
From Othello. And don't worry, folks, I asked everybody that put Iago on their list which Iago they meant. And only one person meant Aladdin. The rest confirmed that it was from Othello. So, Dan, you had Iago on your list. Not in the top 10 like 3 other people did, but you did have Iago on your list. So what do you think? Shakespeare getting some representation here in the top 100?
Hey, man. I mean, we're sophisticated here at Geekcast Radio. What can I say? I'm not gonna lie. Like, I never was someone who was like, "Yay, William Shakespeare." It's like I feel like I'm coming up as a big Philistine this episode. Both with but not liking David Lynch or William Shakespeare. Obviously, his material is genius. It's one of those things where it's like it's a lot of work in a good way, because it's brilliantly written, best plays of all time. So I'm glad that I purposely sought out to make sure that literary villains were included on my list, in both. I guess you wouldn't call literary, but whatever you'd want to, however you would phrase that. So happy to see that Iago made it so far. I know whoever had it second is probably going to be disappointed that Iago's on here. But hopefully Iago here outrank the parrot, but who knows? We'll see.
We did have somebody ranked at 2, somebody ranked at 3rd, and somebody ranked at 6th. Eduardo was actually closest. He had him at 85, and he comes in here at 89. I have no excuses, because I actually took an entire semester in college just on Shakespeare, where all we did for the entire semester was break down Shakespeare's plays and things like that, and I did not have Iago on my list. So maybe I was trying to block out my college years. I don't know. But I'm glad that Shakespeare gets some representation. I don't know what this means as far as the rest of the countdown. Will we see more Shakespeare characters, or is Iago the best villain that he gave us? Any other thoughts, Steve, DJ, or anything as far as seeing a character that's going all the way back to the 1600s?
I'm thinking if he's on here, there's got to be more, because I also studied Shakespeare in school, but when it came to the villain, it's almost like the Calvin Candy thing. When I think of, though, again, apologies, because I know fans of Othello are fans of Othello. I always go to Macbeth as a bad guy, or Lady Macbeth as a bad guy. Hamlet's uncle. I mean, I'm thinking that a lot of these people might show up, because I just look, when I think of Shakespeare, I go to them first as the most evil. But I mean, Iago is a son of a bitch, so I can understand, but it kind of just makes me think there's going to be more, way more.
All right. right, we'll have to wait and see on that. We're going to take a quick break to hear an ad from some of our contributors, just a couple of them, and then we're going to come back and kind of go through the second half of today's episode. So stick with us, and we got an interesting one to start the second half here today, so stay tuned for that.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Download this show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Because the world needs another movie podcast.
The Geekcast Radio Network presents for your listening pleasure the Cinema Geek.
Hosted by Amanda, Kevin, Matt, and Dan.
Each week we dive headfirst in the landscape of movies as we discuss movie news,
play movie games,
go in-depth on reviews,
and even have a top 10 countdown or two.
Also, don't miss our director retrospective series, where we review noted directors' movies film by film.
Bottom line is, if you love movies and love podcasts, you need to experience the Cinema Geeks.
You can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, or GeekCastRadio.com.
I know what we're doing today.
Okay, Michael, if we're going to tackle this podcast thing, we've got to do something really special. It has to be cool, daily, in audio form, and undetectable by radar. Something that screams summer. I know, let's do a Phineas and Ferb review podcast. We'll call it the Podcast Organization Without a Cool Acronym, or POWCA for short. What do you think?
I think if we're not careful, Candace is going to bust us.
You can find POWCA on the Geekcast Radio Network, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, and all of the other methods you find podcasts.
Okay, then. Carry on.
Hello, geeks and geekettes. Looking for a podcast that covers a vast array of topics? Then check out Altered Geek Unleashed, where we discuss our thoughts on this week's geeky news, tech, gaming, television shows, movies, cartoons, comics, and more. So, get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks. Every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. As I said before the break, we have an interesting one to start off the second half, and I don't know if we may or may not get a little bit of backlash on this one, because it definitely may expose another bias that I forgot to mention that we've seen come up in different lists when we were doing different animated things. That's right, we're going back into the world of animation, although I guess technically you could say that this character originated first in a comic, but most people are going to know it from a cartoon. Did anybody think that we would get a villain from the world of Transformers that might make it onto our top 100? So obviously Transformers is something the Geekcast Radio Network is heavily known for. We do a lot of stuff related to Transformers, and yes, there was a Transformers character that snuck into this list, but for the record, it is not because of the members of this panel that are part of the Geekcast Radio. So it was the people that we invited to submit lists that actually got this character onto this list. So yeah,
so that means I'm safe for a while.
so there was one person from the Geekcast Radio that had him on the list, but everybody else is from outside of it. We're actually going with number 88, Starscream.
Yes. I had him on my list.
So DJ and Steve, you guys both had him in your top 50, so the floor is yours. Why is Starscream top 100 worthy?
I bow to you, Steve. Your middle name is Megatron. You had.
Oh, yes. So I had Starscream at number 27 on my list, but that's because he is the most notorious, evil, conniving, backstabbing, and awesome sounding villain in Transformers. And he's just the most untrustworthy evil character out of anybody in Transformers. Like, he's only the only one that can one up him is Megatron, and that's because he's just scared of the sheer power, and that's it.
When the main bad guy of your cartoon is afraid of this person, then that's when you know you got a good villain. So Megatron is like, I got to deal with Optimus. I got to deal with this guy over here. It's like everywhere I turn, Starscream is literally the guy who stabs you in the back. Have you?
That's literally why in the movie when he becomes Galvatron, he blows him away.
Well, first person he kills, he goes, "I got to kill this guy." Wanna bet? Boom, dead. Can't wait. Got to get rid of this guy because even as Galvatron, he's like, "Look, I got empowered by Unicron." But I got to kill this dude because he kicked me when I literally was down. His first scene in Transformers the movie is to kick Megatron while he's down, literally, then throw him out of a plane in space. So yeah,
injected space trash.
What a bet! He just throws him out of a freaking plane, lets him die, and then takes over. The guy is essentially his whole character arc is to get rid of Megatron to take over. He has no other arcs or no other goals other than that.
He's just the
and
ultimate.
he's capable.
He's the ultimate. He's the ultimate a-hole. That's just
yes.
So you guys are not alone. Like I said, 5 people had him in the top 50. Dan, would you like to weigh in on Starscream finding a spot in the top 100 villains of all time?
I'll just bow to the Transformers Masters. I got nothing.
Interesting choice there. Yeah, I don't know. I think some people might give us a hard time for that, but definitely iconic when it comes to cartoon villains. And he's found his way in there, even though I guess technically 1984 comic first before the series started, but that's more of a technicality. But let's move on to another tie here, and we're going to go to number 87. We're going to go back into the world of film and back into a film from the 2000s, so maybe some recency here, I don't know. Does it get much better than finding a way to get Daniel Day-Lewis into a list of characters, because he's here with Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York. I guess originated in a film, even though technically based on a real live person, source material-wise. So Bill the Butcher, number 87. Dan, you did not have him on your list. Is this someone similar to Calvin Candy for you, or do you think he's more worthy? Or what are your thoughts on Bill the Butcher?
Yeah, I think he's more worthy than Calvin Candy. I think Bill Butcher is a great character because, I mean, it's Daniel Day-Lewis. Come on. I mean, it's like, yeah. Like, guy does like a movie a decade, so when he does it, it means something. And Bill, he's just like an insane, character, and there's almost like a comic bookness to his character with his like love of knives, and he's like there's like a hint of it in a way. And Scorsese has a lot of great villains in his films. I think Bill the Butcher though is very different, and I love Geeks in New York because it goes into a time period that is really rarely kind of brought in or talked about within films or medium. It's this. And then like that time of New York is not, you don't see a lot. I think that's what really makes it unique. And I love that, like the barons of that time and kind of the power that they would wield. So he's a great character. When you said Daniel Day-Lewis, I was like wondering if there's a possible another character he played that might show up on here. But I didn't have him. I don't know, mostly because of just when it came to movie villains or other ones that I feel like are more suiting, but I don't have an issue with him showing up here at top 100.
Yeah, I did have him ranked because Gangs of New York is one of my favorite films here of the last couple decades, and I think Daniel Day-Lewis plays this character so perfect and just so interesting as far as the whole character arc and everything he represents of that time period, etc. So I definitely had him ranked, but I can see, when it comes down to film, it's interesting. Also interesting when you're looking so far at the list, because so far, if it's been based on a film, it seems like it's either been from the 2000s or it's been from the 80s. So we haven't had anything else but that, I don't think, unless I'm forgetting one. So DJ, what do you think? Simplistic Reviews also had Bill the Butcher on their list at 66. He comes in here at number 87.
I think it's right. I think the character that Dan is alluding to, I've always seen as more villainous than than Bill. Bill kind of has like a weird, I'll say patriotism. He's like a weird honor to him that you kind of like him. So of the characters that I think this may have been the first Daniel Day-Lewis role that I had seen. I watched his movies like out of order when I was growing up. I seen like Gangs of New York first, and then I saw like My Left Foot afterwards or whatever. And Last of the Mohicans. But yeah, he that character is so good. I almost lose track. Oh yeah, he's the bad guy. He's doing. I'm not supposed to be rooting for this guy, but for some freaking reason, I'm rooting for this guy. But yeah, he Daniel Day-Lewis, I mean, he's almost unfair. It's like literally putting a Ferrari engine into whatever character you want to write. Oh, this character's kind of weak. Let's get Daniel Day-Lewis in here. He'll make him freaking amazing. So.
Yeah, interesting to see if Daniel Day-Lewis was one of those actors that we talked about that might see multiple characters. We've mentioned Christopher Lee maybe as a possibility. So there are a few of them. I will tell you that. We had like 3 or 4 actors that did have multiple characters appear on this countdown. So we'll have to kind of keep track of that. Breaking the tie with Bill the Butcher because he appeared on 32% of the list, which is higher than Bill the Butcher. And this guy, all of the people that voted for him either had him in like the 30 range or the like 60 to 70 range. So nobody had him higher than 30, but a lot of people ranked him. We're also, like I said, when it comes to films, it's either the 2000s or the 80s. So let's go to the 80s here. Number 86 from 1988. How about Chucky? So the first of our possible many, or maybe not, horror films. I don't think we've had anybody else that would be considered, straight out of a horror film. So Chucky makes the countdown here. Steve, we didn't talk to you about Bill the Butcher, but what do you think about Chucky?
Very creepy. When I first got with my wife, she had me watch this, and I'd never seen it before. I'd heard of it, but I'd never seen it before. And then even as an adult, I was just creeped out by watching these. And then, of course, they're still making them. So it just adds to it. And it's still like the original kind of premise to it. It's not like a funky reboot or something. No, it's still the dang, freaking same doll coming back to murder everybody. So it's still just as freaky now as it was back then.
Definitely. I agree with you there. We both were very similar. You had him at 60, around the 64 range. I had him 62. 4 people had him in the 30 to 37 range. Dan, are you surprised that it took up to spot number 86 to get a villain that is mainly featured in horror films?
I don't know, because I think there are, like, if you look at horror, there's maybe 20 or so that are really noticeable. But I didn't think Chucky would make the list, to be honest with you. I didn't include him in my top 100. I know it's a gimmick character, obviously, and it's a gimmick, I guess, that obviously works because it's been around for how long, and seems that whenever it'll go away, even if, like, I remember the one movie where, like, he ends up becoming, like, all scarred and crazy looking and things like that. So, and like most horror villains, it starts off as something scary, then ends up becoming, like, a more like of dark humor or comedic. So I mean, I don't know. Like I think Chucky's fine. Like I mean, I think there are better horror villains out there. So I'm hoping that some of those definitely make the top 100 if Chucky's making it here. But at least I can't argue the fact that he's certainly a very popular and notable character. Everyone, you say Chucky, people know who he is, the look of the character, and it's one that's certainly been, anytime you think of an evil doll, it's going to be Chucky. So. Yeah.
And definitely helped solidify that type of, I guess, subgenre of the horror films. Like if you go, like we went to a haunted house last year, and it was supposed to be one of the best ones in the country, and every room kind of illustrated a different type of horror. So like you had like the one that was like a church, with that type of element. You had the one that was all spiders or something like that, and you definitely have one that is all dolls, and like the Child's Play movies kind of helped solidify that as like a thing, just like it does for clowns and stuff like that. So interesting to bring that up. And DJ, you had this a little bit higher. You had this all the way up at number 37. What do you think about this? And something that I didn't do that I'll have ready by the end of this, I have how many characters are from films, but I'm going to break it down and see how many horror film characters we have. What do you think this says for the future of the countdown, and how many other horror characters we might see?
I think we said at the beginning. I already said at the beginning that I think horror is kind of probably coming in second. Chucky being on here is I kind of voted him because of personal reasons, mainly because Chucky is when I was talking about the Mount Rushmore of horror guys, he's kind of a scumbag and way worse as a person compared to some of the reasons like Voorhees is doing it for revenge. Michael Myers is insane. Freddy Krueger is a scumbag, but Chucky is also just a piece of shit. Like he uses voodoo to try and kill and take over a child. Not like a teenager who's having sex with his girlfriend or, his sister. He's trying to kill a child throughout the entire series. So yeah, Chucky is, for me, kind of shows that horror is going to be big on this countdown.
Yeah, it might be a sign of that. We'll have to wait and see. Let's move on to number 85, getting here towards the last 10 of today's episode. And I'm almost afraid to go to it. I'm just going to give DJ the floor on this one. And he's going to be able to say his piece because this has spawned some discussion on the Facebook versus matchups that we did. And one of those is appearing on this list. And I think DJ might have some strong feelings one way or the other on it. So coming in at number 85, guess what? It's a film, and it's either from the 80s or the 2000s. For this one, we're going to the year 2000 from a guy that I think is a good actor to play a villain. Let's go to Joaquin Phoenix and his representation of the character Commodus from Gladiator.
Oh, nice.
DJ?
Too low. Too low. Guys. You got to understand what Commodus did in that movie. Maybe you guys don't remember because all you remember is Elizabeth Taylor going, Gladiator! You don't really remember, like when we first introduced to him, his first thing he does is to come on to his sister. Then he kills his father by suffocating him. Then he sends the hero out and to be murdered by his Praetorians. At the same time, he's raping and murdering his wife and child. Then he sends him into slavery. Then he literally tries to psychologically affect his own sister by talking about killing her child if he wasn't allowed, if he's not given the right, apparently, to have children with her. This guy is a piece of crap, and he's so good at it. He's so good. And honestly, if it wasn't for his own hubris, because he could have just been super like, I'll just stay up here and let my minions do it, but he actually fought Maximus, he would have won, because before that fight, he killed him. Spoiler alert. He stabs him in the heart. Maximus, just to even out the fight, he stabs him in the heart, and Maximus, guess what he dies of? The stab from Joaquin Phoenix. And on the Facebook thing, they were throwing Joffrey at me. I'm like, Joffrey's he's a piker compared to Commodus. Commodus has done so much horrible things. I mean, he's starved. He gets his hands dirty. He starved Rome. He murdered the Senate. What are you? Commodus to me is too low, and he's Joaquin Phoenix. When this happened, I wanted him to win for the Oscar because he was nominated for it. He's so good in this role where you could just, without saying anything, you can just see how sick he is. Absolutely. How sick in his head. And especially the scene where he's talking about, you will watch as I bathe in his blood. Well, he's tormenting his sister. That is villainy right there. That is not a man who's like trying to be, I'm just the bad, I'm trying to stop the good guy. No, that person, whether there was a Maximus or not, is pure evil. Which they make secret meetings, that says, we got to get rid of this guy. This guy's super evil. We can't have him running Rome. He's killing everyone. He put a snake in a dude's bed, for Christ's sake. The guy has to go. And I think he's so low on this list because I don't think people remember that. They just remember, Gladiator, that's the Sword and Sandals movie where they're finding the thing. No. Rewatch Gladiator and just pay attention to the deeds. This is where I talk about capability, goals, and past accomplishments. Watch what he does in that movie. It's horrid, and it's great.
If you haven't figured out, DJ had this character in his top 10.
Yes,
I have it I had it at number 21. I think it's a great villain from a great film. So I think there's definitely room for him. I think he helps make that film in the way that he plays off of Russell Crowe. And just like you said, the stuff that he's capable of doing. And yeah, there's been a lot of movies where people have done despicable things, but there's just something about this, especially in the year 2000. I don't know, like he was in a period piece like this, and he so represents a lot of those types of characters that existed in real life in that time period. So I think he's very worthy. Dan, where do you weigh in on the Gladiator worthiness of Commodus being on this list?
I mean, DJ's not wrong when it comes to the fact of like when you think of Gladiator, people not thinking of his character or not thinking of other deeds he did. And honestly, when I think of Gladiator, first thing I think of it is not him per se. It's Russell Crowe fighting tigers, because that's awesome. I mean, it's hard to beat fighting It's hard to be fighting tigers. I mean, that's a image that'll stick in your head. But I mean, DJ certainly makes a great point regarding why he should be considered on this list. That I mean, when you lead with incest, and
leading with incest, he comes out the gate with it.
Building a good resume of why you should be an evil character. So maybe I need to go back and learn more.
So sleeping with your family, killing your family, killing children.
And he sides. It's patricide, matricide. He's doing all the sides. He's got them all down.
I do. When I did watch the movie, just being just wanting him to die so much, and we talked about hating villains and wanting to see him lose. And this is before I knew who Joaquin Phoenix was. I just, it's one I think kind of opened me up to him, and I think even after that, I ended up not liking Joaquin Phoenix. I kept associating him with this character, and be like, I don't like that guy. I obviously do now, but yeah. So I did not include him, and maybe in looking back on it, that might have been my error. So.
We'll have to wait and see. Steve, do you think Commodus is worthy of being represented here in the top 100?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I pretty much could mirror everything that DJ said.
All right, DJ, well done, sir. Well done. All right.
There's a deleted scene where he finds the men who lied to him about killing Maximus, and he stands behind them while the archers are aiming at them, and he's daring them to shoot him. Like, please shoot me. Go ahead. You better kill me, because I'm going to not just kill you. I'm going to murder and rape your entire family. The man is pure black evil. He's horrid.
Yes. Agreed. All right, let's go on. I'm sure we'll have some comments on the website as far as this episode goes for that one. So some people may agree or disagree. We'll have to wait and see. Let's go to number 84. We have not gone to the world of TV too often yet. This is only our third foray into the world of TV. And the last two, if you remember, were for the TV shows Lost and Justified. How about we go a little bit further back, maybe a little bit more classic when it comes to TV villain, maybe the most classic TV villain. Let's go to 1978. J.R. Ewing.
You got no morals, you got no scruples. You might be worthy of me yet. That's Mama's chair. Nobody sits in it but her.
Where would you like for me to sit?
Right there. Used to be Pam's chair. Couldn't stand her either.
From the show Dallas. So obviously Dallas was something that came up when we did our top 100 TV series. Dan, you had J.R. Ewing at 36. I had him at 27. He shows up here at 84. Is it too soon, like DJ was saying with Commodus? Are we getting a couple guys that are just a little too early on, or what do you think?
I think, Dallas is, well before a lot of our times. I don't know a lot of huge Dallas fans outside of TFG and Mike who will spend many a day talking about Dallas. So
he especially didn't like it when I told him that anything that he likes gets canceled. So
I just know looking to this list, and I was looking at some of the most notable TV villains, JR was always on the top. And honestly, when I think of JR, I think of The Simpsons and, Who Shot Montgomery Burns, as if it was a parody of Who Shot JR. So I'm not going to lie, that's the first thing I think of. But, you got to be a pretty iconic if Simpsons, when it was really good, would certainly pay homage to you. So points for JR there. I think a lot of people that are huge Dallas fans or know the character will probably say he's not nearly as high enough because Dallas was one of the biggest shows of all time, and he was a big reason for it. So, yeah, certainly.
Another character that appeared on somebody's top 10, so he was in David Brufy's top 10 at number 7, so a classic character falling right now. DJ, what do you think? We had Justified, Lost, and now Dallas represented in the TV world.
I kind of like J.R. Ewing. I'm sorry, but no, I could. He's like, the guy's iconic. I mean, I'm old as dirt. I did grow up in the time of Dallas and Dynasty and all those Hotel and the rest of those shows. And J.R. Ewing was that dude. He was like, oh man, this guy, he's got to go. When they shot J.R. Ewing, it was just like, it's like, oh thank God. Oh crap, he's alive. Damn it. But no, he's a great character. He's played amazingly. I forget the name of the actor who played him. He's passed on, but he was. You think of that show, you think of Dallas, you think of those late night soaps. He was that guy. He was the icon. So yeah.
Yeah, Larry Hagman was the actor that played him. So, all right, moving on to number 83. Number 83 is going to do something we haven't done too much here. Only one time have we gone to a character that predated the 1940s when we went all the way back to the 1600s for a character that appeared in a play, a Shakespeare play with Iago. We're also going to go back, not quite as far back as the 1600s, but let's go back to about 1904. Another character that originated in a play, obviously not a Shakespeare play, and most people will more familiarize this character from a Disney film, but originally in the J.M. Barrie 1904 play, we're going to go with Captain Hook at number 83. And Captain Hook was all over the place. We had one person that had him in the teens, one person in the 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So all over the place. Dan, you had him ranked fairly high. So are you disappointed or happy just that he made the list? Captain Hook here at number 83.
I'll say I'm somewhat a little disappointed. I thought maybe with the fact that he is in a Disney film, he would be ranked a little higher. And I think, I don't know, maybe that hurts some people because they don't realize that there's actually, that's just one interpretation of the character. He's been around for some time. But I love Captain Hook because you can kind of approach the character in different ways. He can be this scary kind of villain that's legitimately trying to kill children. Like that's the pastime he's trying to do, is kill kids. If you talk about evil, that's pretty far up there. But then, there's some of the more comedic side of him as well, where, there's some slapstickness in his portrayal as well. So, he's a pirate. You gotta love pirates. So witches and pirates so far. I'm thinking we'll see more of those as they come up. But, I just think Captain Hook is he certainly takes the archetype of that type of character that were in past stories, and I'm guessing we may see some of the influences where you see, but I love just the story, like how he has this crazy fear of an alligator and the ticking clock. I think there's just all these cool niches with his character. So I don't know, I've always enjoyed Captain Hook. He's probably one of my favorite. I don't necessarily just call him a Disney villain, but one of my favorite villains of that time, because I've enjoyed him in all the different Peter Pan properties except for whatever that was that Hugh Jackman was in. We can forget that existed. So.
I forgot about that movie.
Dan, you were the highest person that ranked Captain Hook, but also ranked by TV's Mr. Neil, Hard Candy Mandy, Dave Baruffi, Kristen, and Steve. You also had Captain Hook ranked. So what do you think about Captain Hook showing up here in number 83?
I definitely think that he's a warranted villain that deserves to be on this list. Just for the fact that he's got that iconicness of that evil swashbuckling pirate with the hook, and then just trying to destroy kids in general, and being scared of basically water jaws of an alligator.
DJ, are we going to see more pirates or more witches in our countdown?
Oh man, I think you're going to see one more witch, and I think you're going to. I think I might be it with the pirates. He might. Well, I don't know.
Well,
I mean, Captain Hook is essentially the pirate villain. I think of even Barbossa. I think is kind of Jeffrey Rush is kind of channeling his own version of Captain Hook when he's playing that character, because that's what you grew up on. If you were a little kid, your mother sat you down and made you watch frickin' Peter Pan or read the book or give you the coloring book. Captain Hook is that one of maybe a lot of people's first villain that they've ever seen. So yeah, Captain Hook is super deserving to be on this list.
All right, we'll have to see. We'll have to keep track of witches and pirates and things like that as we move on forward. Side note to keep track of. We only have 7 left, and or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7 left. And interesting to note that 4 of them are going to predate the 1900s.
Oh my God!
So we are representing the classics well here, but one that's not going to represent pre-1900 era is our next pick, and I'm interested to see what people's reactions are to this one. One thing that we put out when we were gathering people and giving them the kind of criteria to go off of is we said that real people were not eligible because we didn't want someone to just say like Hitler or things like that. So we tried to eliminate that, and at number 82 we do have a real person who is in essence being himself, but he's also playing a character.
Me?
And it is entertainment. Number 82, Vincent McMahon.
I say it's time.
He got the pants unzipped.
For you to get on your knees.
What?
Uh-oh.
Also, a little blurry.
I said it's time for you to get on your knees.
What? You got a hearing problem?
You don't want to do this.
What? Man, this thing could erupt.
You don't want to have McMahon Austin too.
What?
No. You want to end this tonight by publicly kissing my ass and it's over. Well, you won't be laughing after WrestleMania. You're going to be laughing at Donald Trump. You know what? Here's what I think. The reason Donald Trump's not coming out here is because, well, he knows I have the grapefruits to give him a patented Mr. McMahon billionaire bitch slap. Let's get out of here.
Wait a second here. Not so fast there, Mr. McMahon. Perhaps, indeed, yes. The Donald is here, live on Monday Night Raw. He's still here. And Mr. Trump not coming alone. I like how he travels. Well, I know one thing. Mr. Trump has good taste. Look at those divas. Can you say that Trump is a prophet? I think that's spelled P-R-O-F-I-T. He could profit by defeating his man, Bobby Lashley, defeating Umaga at WrestleMania 23. Can you imagine Donald Trump sitting in Ford Field before thousands of people watching around the world and live with his head being shaved bald? What that would mean in Wall Street? Look at this site, JR. 2 of the most powerful businessmen in the world. 2 billionaires in the ring. Monday Night Raw, this is a contract signing. Donald Trump, Mr. McMahon for WrestleMania 23. Hair versus hair. Either Trump or McMahon will leave WrestleMania bald. The Donald chant going here.
You people shut up!
Oh.
First of all, Vince, your grapefruits are no match for my Trump Towers.
From the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, or whatever iteration you want to call it, WWE, WWF, which era do you want to go with? But Vince McMahon, from all kinds of different decades, I guess. From the 80s, 90s, 2000s. He's at number 82. He appeared on 28% of the list. Dan, is he eligible even though he's somewhat of a real person? Playing himself?
I mean, he's not. I mean, it's clearly a character, yeah. I mean, yeah. So, honestly, the real life Vince McMahon may be more evil than the character Vince McMahon.
These are true things he's saying.
I'm pretty sure he's ordered a few murders or at least close to it on occasion.
Whoa, allegedly, as your lawyer, Dan.
Allegedly.
I can't
Kill
have
him in
you
the
say
ring.
that.
Murder's not that bad, guys.
Reckless speculation by Dan.
I've been told murder's not that bad.
It's a weird list so far where you have, Shakespeare and WWE, not that far apart. So.
Whoever thought you'd get a list with Iago and Vince McMahon listed on it?
Exactly. I mean, like, I thought about wrestling when I was making my list. I did think about wrestling villains, and the hard thing with, like, when it comes to wrestling villains is that a lot of, faces or heels, like, they tend to go back and forth. Like Ric Flair, he's obviously a notable villain, but so it's hard to really pick one for them. But Vince McMahon's pretty much always been the evil guy. When you look at when WWE was at its prime in the Attitude Era, like, he was that. He was the Stone Cold doesn't work without Vince McMahon being that character, and I think when that was popular, that was like, I remember just being in high school at that time, and everyone was watching wrestling, no matter who you were. So, it's kind of cool seeing this character. I mean, like, I guess you would call him like a TV character, but.
Yeah, I have him listed in the TV group, I guess, but I had him ranked in the top 30. Amanda was the highest one with Vince McMahon at number 18. DJ, one of the choices that we gave when we were coming up with this top 100 list, we gave like 4 or 5 different topics that people could choose. One of them was top 100 wrestling characters. So is Vince McMahon getting in here a result of people that were mad that wasn't what we chose instead of the top 100?
They're spiting you.
They're like, we're going to get him in there no matter what.
I mean, I could see it. I mean, we were having a discussion on Facebook about comparing Vince McMahon to another fictional character. I won't get into the argument, but he has done despicable things, and he is a character. I mean, things that I've seen Vince McMahon do on television, I dare not repeat on this program. So he is deserving to be on, I don't say this list. Again, if it was like expanded, I could see it, because it's very hard for some people to separate the fact that he is actually playing a character. I mean, they're all playing a character. Nobody, once that lights go up, they're exaggerated versions of themselves. So I'm not
sure that Macho Man was playing a character.
Oh, yes, I was. Dig it, yeah.
That might have been him.
He was living the gimmick.
He was living the gimmick.
Being myself. Yeah. No. But I mean, Vince McMahon. I mean, I've seen him fight everyone from Pete Rose to Donald Trump. I mean, the guy is essentially.
Is that a hero now? Or are we going to switch him to a hero?
He's been both. I mean, when he's fighting Donald Trump, ironically, he was the villain, which is strange to me now. But yeah, I think if you expand the list, yes. But I mean, I understand why he's here. I don't think it was spite.
Steve, what do you think of a wrestling persona character making the top 100 list?
I think it's almost kind of like a cop-out, but because they're like caricatures of themselves, but they are real people. So like I think it's kind of like they shouldn't really be here. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, he is evil, so.
So we'll have to wait and see what people think about us creating them. I do think it's a character that is being played. I think it's, I don't know, we'll have a couple that come up, I think, throughout the top 100 that we'll have to maybe consider the discussion on if they were eligible or not. But I think it's good. I like the wrestling character. Maybe it's a tip of the iceberg to an eventual list that we might eventually get to down the road. So, all right, let's go to our number 81 pick. Like I said, the majority of the rest of the picks are going to be pre-1900s. And I don't know if this will be the oldest character that we get in the entire countdown or not. I haven't looked, but this is definitely in the running for one of the oldest. We haven't had one that originated in a poem yet. But we do have a character right here that originated in a poem from around the year 700. I didn't do extensive research, so I may be off on that. Somebody probably will correct me on the internet. But let's go with Grendel. Number 81, the Grendel. Now, maybe he's just on here because he's become a nickname of one of our contributors. I don't know. But Dave from the Pop Culture Case Study is often called the Grendel. Dan, what do you think of the Grendel showing up here? And one thing I will say, he probably would have been higher if votes had not been split between two different characters that appeared in that poem. So that could have played into him actually not being as high as he would have been. Dan, what do you think?
Interesting. I don't know. Like when ranking my list, I looked at some of these characters. I did wonder, like, would they fall? Would people include them? Because I think, for a lot of people, when they read Beowulf, they were forced to read it in high school, and like basically, and
Literally.
it's not like it's dense. It's a dense work, and if not done by the appropriate teacher, it can end up really turning you off to the character, unfortunately, or that entire story. But you can't deny, you 700, like legitimately, not like that's. We talk about villains and talking about their impact in characters and things like that. You're talking about legitimately when storytelling at this level was kind of being established and being told, and like how these characters have stayed the test of time, even though their works weren't television shows, they weren't comic books, they were having to be passed down time and time again throughout that period of time is pretty legendary. So I think if you're just looking at the way characters have impacted just the genre of storytelling or fiction, certainly I think you would argue that character should be much higher. But again, like I know, like and also you have that really not great Robert Zemeckis Beowulf movie, which may kind of give people the false impressions about what that story has. So yeah, I'm happy. I mean, that's pretty cool that we're seeing such a huge variety of characters with this, which I think we anticipated, but it makes me wonder if it's going to be kind of end backloaded with a lot of the classic characters and then more of the recent characters up front. Time will tell.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. It was in one person's top 5. DJ, is Grendel the more deserving of the two more villainous characters from Beowulf, or will we see another person from this story?
I thought it'd be Angelina Jolie, actually. No, Beowulf again is one of those things that you're forced, to like Dan was saying, to essentially read and whatever. But I can see it. I guess I'm just surprised. I'm more surprised that he's on this list. That more people even thought to go back and say, "Oh yeah, Grendel from that poem I had to read by my teacher. I would fail literature class or something like that." And again, I'm kind of demeaning his importance in modern classics or whatnot. It's just I thought that we'd be more of a pop culture would take over, stuff like that. The fact that we're getting all of these characters from Grendel to Captain Hook and stuff like that, and some more that I think may be coming up on this list. Iago, I'm just more surprised than anything. Grendel being on this list is surprising. Who would have thought on the Geekcast Radio Network Grendel would beat out Darth Maul? That's amazing.
And Starscream.
and Starscream. Well,
really.
That's a crime. That's a crime, actually.
So yeah, interesting here to see Grendel at number 81. Let's stay back in the day with our number 80 pick. I cannot pinpoint an exact date because I don't think anybody ever has on this one.
The dawn of time.
No, I don't think I would put Grendel as the older character, but it's harder to pinpoint when this next character actually originated. We're going to say that the source would be folklore and possibly somewhere in the 1300s, even if more people will associate it with a film from the 1900s that Disney may have done or some live action stuff. But we're going to go to the world of Robin Hood for the Sheriff of Nottingham at number 80. So a lot of different variations of this character exist in literature, on film, etc. So there's a lot to pick from, but still a fairly old character. Made it on to 32% of the list. Dan, you had it the highest. TV's Mr. Neil had it the closest at 78, but you had it the highest. You had it in your top 20. So what do you think of the Sheriff of Nottingham showing up right here at number 80?
I mean, I guess not surprised it's not higher. I mean, I think the problem is when you do have a character like Sheriff Nottingham that has so many different versions, you also have a lot of bad versions, and he almost gets lost in the shuffle because he's such there's not really one defining version of it. I mean, for me, I would go Man in Tights, but that's just my personal taste.
Maybe if you tell me the bad news in a good way, it won't sound so bad.
The bad news in a good way.
Yes, I can do that. Yes, bad news in a good way. Yeah.
Well, here goes. Wait till you hear this. I just bumped into Robin of Locksley. He's back from the Crusades. He just beat the crap out of me and my men. He hates you and he loves your brother, Richard. He wants to see you hanged. We're in an awful lot of trouble.
What, are you crazy? Why are you laughing? This is terrible news.
Well, you told me I was just trying to soften the blow.
Well, you blew it.
I challenge you to a duel. I accept. So it's come down to this, has it? A fight to the death. Mano a mano. Man to man. Just you and me and my God!
But, so I just think, it's a character that, it's Robin Hood has been told so much, and that story is not going to be retold to that level unless something's working. And I think Sheriff of Nottingham is, again, if you just look at characters that you just want to see kind of get their demise, he's certainly there, just like the bratty kid who has too much power and tries to basically take from the poor or kind of do everything for himself that he shouldn't be doing. So I again, not too surprised that he's not higher on the list, but kind of happy that the Sheriff of Nottingham is here, because I love a lot of the Robin Hood stories, from Errol Flynn to the even like Disney film. I think is highly underrated.
Another interesting thing to kind of look for, I guess, is, with some of these Disney villains, a lot of the Disney films are obviously based on other works and folklore and novels or different things like that. Interesting to see how those characters, like we've seen here with Captain Hook and Sheriff Nottingham, who obviously appeared in Disney films, but also a lot of other things, how will they compare? Will we see any that are just strictly Disney films, or is it taking these ones that have had a longer shelf life to really outlast these? Obviously we had some that appeared in our top 100 animated characters from Disney films. So we'll have to see kind of how that plays out. Steve, what do you think of Sheriff of Nottingham? Also, one thing that could hurt him, I guess, in some respects would be if you liked other villains in those stories more than Sheriff Nottingham. So, if someone was big on, Prince John or Ka or I don't know, somebody else, would that take away points? Steve, what do you think of Sheriff of Nottingham kind of finding a place here?
I think it's kind of fitting. I mean, there's the old Robin Hood lore, there's the Disney film, and then there's like the Robin Hood Men in Tights type thing. So, I mean, you've got all different iterations of these characters, and so I think that he's kind of deserving of this placement.
DJ, what do you think? And kind of how, like I said, some of these properties that have multiple villains, did that hurt his chances of being higher?
Maybe. I lean more toward Prince of Thieves because of Rickman reasons. That though I love Alan Rickman and I impersonate him as many times as I get. That character wasn't, like you're saying, the villain I thought of, because again, I watched the animated, Robin Hood. It was always the prince it was the villain, and Sheriff of Nottingham is kind of like a throwaway. But when Alan Rickman took the role, I was like, oh, okay, this character is who I should be focusing on, because he's so much more villainous. I mean, he killed his own. At least I didn't use a spin. He killed his own cousin in that movie. He's very richer, I think, because the prince is just not. He's just a spoiled little brat. This guy's kind of got more layers to him. So, and the reason that there's been like 17 different versions of him could have weakened him if there was a definitive version. I think it's Rickman. Some people think it's I forget the name of the actor who played him in Men in Tights. He was in The Mantis. But I can see how I'm dropping. I'm glad he's here. I'm glad he's on this list, because it went right past my memory, and then as soon as I heard you say it, I was like, oh yeah, freaking Sheriff of Nottingham is freaking awesome. So yeah,
absolutely. All right, DJ, a couple picks ago you said stuff about surprising that we're getting a lot more classic characters and not as many maybe pop culture characters. I don't know. Here we go. I don't know of one that might fit that definition better than what we're getting here at number 79. We're going to go back to a character that originated in film, and what are our film rules? It's either the 2000s or the 80s. Let's go to 1984 for a character, I guess, created by Chris Columbus. The 1984 villains. I guess this could bring up a question. Does a group of villains count? Let's go with the Gremlins at number 79. So appeared on 24% of the list. I don't know. Gremlins, guys, and none of us had them on the list. Deserving or not? Let's start with Steve. What do you think? Do the Gremlins deserve a spot?
I kind of think so. I mean, it was if you're going by the first film and not the second one, I would say yes. The second one was just it was a joke upon itself, but and now they're talking about making a third one. So no. Yeah, thank you, movie news. Goes along with Beetlejuice too.
Stop saying things. Stop hurting us.
So, yeah, I mean, if you consider the fact that they weren't originally evil and they were mogwais, that a human was a moron and didn't follow the manual, which is typical human fashion, then you could say that. It's almost the Jurassic Park theory of man created dinosaur, in a sense. But so I don't know. They're kind of evil, but it's caused by man's error. So I don't really know where they would really fit. But if you're going strictly on how they act after they've become gremlins, then yeah, they're a royal pain.
DJ, if the Gremlins made the list, should we expect the Tribbles from Star Trek to also make
the
list?
Tribbles are gentle beings, okay? That's because they like to have...
But Scotty did transport them into the engine room of the Klingon ship.
That is true.
Where there are no Tribble at all.
Scotty, put in the trip. The thing about Gremlins when I think of the villain aspect of them, I think of Spike. But I think if you just said Spike, he would never make this list. But as an entity of a group, yes, I can see the Gremlins making this list. And I mean, if Boris and Natasha is kind of throughout the whole singular or plural situation here, but you're right, man. The Gremlin. I mean, essentially all they do is create chaos, so I can understand them being here. But I mean, when it comes to they're the villain, the Gremlins are the villains. I just think of Spike. Spike was the badass. He was the one kicking Gizmo all over the damn place. The rest of them were just like, throw him in the microwave, chop him up. It was fine. But Spike was the one where you're like, oh shit, here comes Spike. That's the bad guy. But I think he would be missed. I think people would forget about that character, or wouldn't even consider him being that high compared to other things. But the Gremlins are so iconic as a group, I can see them on here.
Well, for the purpose of being 100% transparent, all of the people that voted for this voted for the Gremlins as a group, except for one that voted for just Spike. And I did combine all of those votes into the same group. So
this is Putin again, Putin again.
So I didn't want to leave the one person that did single Spike out from the group that all said Gremlins. So Dan, what do you think? Do Gremlins deserve to be on here? And are they considered from a horror film? Does this count with Chucky, or is this just more of a fun film?
I don't think it would be considered horror. I could be wrong. I don't know. Gremlins are they're fun and everything like that, but I don't necessarily think that they deserve to be top 100 villains of all time. Just look at the list of characters we talked about. From Shakespeare to Beowulf and now Gremlins. So it seems kind of odd. I mean they're fine in their own right and everything like that, but it's. I don't know. I didn't list them. I didn't really think about listing them. So
none of us did. So, but enough love. Like I said, about 25% of the people did think that there was room for the Gremlins. They're not too high. They're just in this first little, 15, 25 group. So I guess I can let it slide. But you're right. It does sound funny that we have some of these side by side. So you got Iago was back to back with Starscream. And, we have like the Grendel and Sheriff of Nottingham back to back with Gremlins. So a little bit of something for everybody, I guess.
You don't remember that great literary classic, Gremlins 2?
Steve already talked
New
about
batch?
Let's move on to number 78. Only 3 picks left for today. So number 78, the last pick on this side of the 1900s. We're going back to 1993, our first film villain from the 90s. So again, this one might blur the lines a little bit because in a way we have somebody that is playing a real life person. So I don't know if people will have a problem with that or not. This is a fictionalized version, I guess, but also very almost true to the real life version. Let's go to the film Schindler's List and go with Ralph Fiennes and Eamon Goth, who obviously is all kinds. I guess this goes to the thing about, how despicable somebody is. Is that giving them more points just on just how pure evil they are? Dan, you had this one at 86, and he comes in at 78. That's the closest out of everybody. So what do you think about this one?
Well, you're evil when you're a Nazi, and you still seem evil compared to the people around you.
Fact.
So it's like, you're in the company of the worst people ever, and and they're looking at you like, yeah, that guy's a little weird. He's a little much. I mean, when I think of Schindler's List, like I think of like that character and him like on his balcony, just legitimately just shooting people with like little disregard. Ralph Fiennes is great actor, and it's a chilling performance, no doubt, and just the lack of humanity and like the void of empathy he portrays, and it's just again, he talked about just villains, and it's not like it's like a level of beyond just being angry and just being disgusted. It's it's hard to watch because that's kind of the purpose of that film. So I know I was struggling when it came to characters that were based on real people, but I felt like it was enough of a departure that it was worthy of a top 100. So yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the few guys that I did like this. The same type of thing with Bill the Butcher, basically representing somewhat of a real person, although this one would probably be a little bit more accurate to, some of the details. But I also listed Eamon Goth. I had him at number 100, so just barely fitting into my list. We did have this one appear in somebody's top 3, so Eduardo had this one at number 3. DJ, what do you think? Is this worthy of being in the top 100?
Yeah, I think. I mean, there's a scene in that movie in Schindler's List. There's many scenes in movies, a masterpiece. But there's scenes where, like, because you're kind of watching it through Liam Neeson's perspective, and he's kind of, I don't want to say he's friends with him, but he is kind of friends with Ralph Fiennes' character. And when like Ralph Fiennes' character is talking to him, it's like Liam Neeson's trying to hide the fact that he's realizing this guy is sick. I can't. He does it very subtly, where he's just kind of like looking at him like, because Ralph Fiennes will say something despicable or do something horrible, and you're kind of like, because you're in his perspective, you almost feel, I don't say sorry for him, but you're kind of like, oh no, he's no redemption for this guy. This guy is pure darkness inside of him. So yeah, that character, that scene on the balcony that Dan brings up, that effed me up for a very long. I thought it in high school. And I was aghast. And that's like maybe like the third most despicable thing he does in the movie. I mean, so yeah, he I think for me, he deserves to be on the list.
Steve, we had Gremlins last pick. Is there a spot later on for just Nazis in general? As depicted in any movie?
Well, they're kind of evil in general, so I think it goes without saying that, if we were going with real life type of characters, they would be number 1. But we should, I don't really know how to answer that, just because like it's both fictional and non-fictional at the same time. So like I think it goes without saying that they're just pure evil anyway.
There we go. I think that's the best way to answer that question. So 2 picks left for today. They're both predating the 1900s. We're going to go back to the 1800s for both of these picks. Let's start with number 77, originated in a novel by one Mary Shelley. Let's go with Frankenstein's Monster from 1818. On about 25% of the list. The highest was Toon Master Tim, who had him in at number 10. Dan, you also had Frankenstein's Monster listed at about number 32 for you. Are you happy that we have another classic character making the list, or is this solidifying your stance that you're thinking we might just get a ton of classic characters early on and none that are still around to be called their name, in the top 25?
No, I think I struggled with Frankenstein's Monster because I think he was higher on my list, he was lower on my list, he was off my list because, is Frankenstein's Monster really a villain? And I think you could make the argument that he really isn't a villain. I think that's legitimate, but I think ultimately he becomes one, and it's the act of why he becomes one that it makes him such a compelling character. So I think that's why ultimately I'm like, yes, he deserves to be on this list. I think like that's probably why a lot of people probably could have kept him off, because I think you could make the case that it's more Frankenstein or Frankenstein that that deserves to be on the villains list than he does, because it's someone's kind of been brought into something against his own will or its own will. So. But yeah, I am happy that at least we are getting a lot of this classic representation on the list.
And don't worry, I already have 24 pre-scripted responses for the "that's not a real villain" argument. So I just have them ready to go. I don't even know which character they're going to pick. I'm just going to throw a random one back at them. So yeah, Frankenstein's Monster, DJ. This is a lot of classic characters with Grendel and the Sheriff of Nottingham, Captain Hook, Iago. What do you think of Monster from Frankenstein joining that list?
I mean, I kind of brought it up when we were talking about Roy Beatty. I'm going to be one of those people that's like, hey, that's not a real villain. But, I mean, when I was younger, I was like, oh, he's a bad guy because his name is Frankenstein's Monster. But as I've grown up and realized, we looked at the character, it's like, oh, okay, he's kind of just the result of an actual villain's madness or, irresponsibility, essentially. So Frankenstein being on here in terms of iconography makes complete sense to me. It's just, if you really delve into what makes a villain, he would be weighed off of this list for me. I think comparing him to his other monster compatriots, like the one from Transylvania or the one that turns into a wolf, he's not as villainous. Even in those horrid Van Helsing movie, plural, he's always played as the kind of reluctant villain that becomes the hero at the end. So he's shaky for me, but again, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, well, all right, they must have just went with because he's the monster guy. But Frankenstein is the monster. Frankenstein is the monster.
Very good. Let's get it right. We don't want to be called out on that. Steve, last word on the monster from Frankenstein. Steen?
I definitely think it's more the doctor that's the evil one than the creature itself, because it didn't ask to be mangled together from a bunch of dead people. It's another one of those trying to find its purpose type things, like the replicants. So right. It's kind of a product of its upbringing, literally.
Good point. So we'll have to wait and see what people think about that one, and if he deserves a spot or not. Let's go to the last pick for today. So we're down to number 76. Also appeared in a novel from the 1800s. On 32% of the list on Dan and my list, I'm very happy, and people will know why, that this character is showing up, because I do think there is a lot of layers to this character. It's from the novel, I guess, / play, and we're going with Javert from Les Mis. I think this is a very complex villain, so I think there's a lot to him in comparison to just somebody who's just evil, you know what I mean? And he's not necessarily just evil, he's doing what he thinks is right at times, but at times is also villainous in the way he's going about it, and there's that murder and different things like that are on his mind and stuff like that. So I am very happy. I did not think he had a snowball's chance in hell of making this list, but 32% of people agreed with me, so hey, Javert is on the list. Dan, what do you think?
I'm really surprised, because I could see why. Just the fact that the last time people saw that character was Russell Crowe was singing, so maybe
that's why they think it's villainous.
He's so villain. Listen to that voice.
Yeah. So I could see why. I rank that character in large part not because of that single film, but the original play itself, the Liam Neeson's movie from the 90s, or is it late 2000s? I can't remember, but and like you said, that there are some complexities of the character, and like I tend to enjoy characters that have villains that have unique or kind of intriguing relationships with the heroine or hero of the story, or and he certainly won. So I felt like that was a big reason why he deserved to be on the list. I, like you, didn't anticipate him being on the top 100, considering it's Les Mis, and I know there's a lot of people who love the last film and a lot of people who were not big fans of it, so I wasn't sure where it would fall. But I don't know. It's been not at all what I expected with this first top 25. So.
Another thing that's interesting, DJ, that we might have to keep an eye out too is when we do have a character that is a villain, quote unquote, that maybe you can relate to part of their thought process or part of their circumstances as to how they're getting to where they've gotten. Does that make him rise on your list, or does that make you discount him as less of a quote unquote villain?
I think it makes it rise on my. I think it's almost case I want to say case by case, because there's some times where you'll have a villain like this and you can kind of see where he's coming from, but then I don't know, when they're when they're more pure evil. For me personally, I'm like, okay, this guy. When you take away the concept of redemption from the character, it makes it more like, oh my god, I can't even consider him being any lower than this. And this character here, and I'm going to pronounce his name completely wrong. I always say it wrong.
Javert.
But yeah, I sympathize with him a little bit. Comparing it to somebody as evil as Dracula, it might rise and fall. But yeah, I can see it in this case probably rising in this, because it gives this characters depth. Depth is sometimes a weakness, but in this case, it's more of a strength.
All right, so that is the first set of 25. Just want to get your guys' quick kind of on-the-spot reactions to the list so far before we close out the show. We'll be brief, but Dan, you said this is not at all what you expected from the first set of 25. What's the biggest surprise for you, or your just initial reaction so far?
I don't think we've had one comic book villain,
we have
if I'm not mistaken. Oh. So that surprises me a great deal.
Well, Starscream is the closest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are. I think we've had the oldest characters we've ever had, or anything, when it comes to year 700 to Shakespeare. That's a very different list. If you gave me this list and asked me where it came from so far, I'd be like, that's not Geekcast Radio's top 100 list. But I do love this huge variety. I think that's going to be the one fun thing about this top 100 is that we're going to see, it's such a broad topic that we will see, all people from all shapes and sizes and from all different mediums, from wrestling to classic literature. So I have no idea where we're headed next. So
yeah, we've seen a couple animated. We've seen one video game character, only one character from a horror movie, no comic book characters. We've also seen a lot of a variety as far as actors that are real good at playing villains, maybe from some people's point of view, with Ralph Fiennes and Daniel Day-Lewis, Dennis Hopper, Christopher Lee. DJ, what's your biggest surprise so far, or thing you're happiest about? I guess I don't know.
I think I got to get my long cigarette and my beret and my dark glasses, because this is kind of like the art house 100 villains list. I got my Grendel over here. No, it's surprising, and it's actually kind of cool, because it's okay. Well, they put some thought into this. If there's as wide a range from the Gremlins to Captain Hook to Grendel to now Vince McMahon, it's just we're getting like a kind of a schizophrenic list at the bottom. But I think when it gets to the nitty gritty, we're gonna start seeing some of the all right, here we go, because the ones that I thought I was worried about not even making the list were here. I was like, okay, I got my boy Crowder, I'm happy. I got my Chucky, I'm happy. I got my Starscream, I'm happy. So yeah.
Interesting too. Some big high profile creators of villains too, with Mary Shelley, Shakespeare, right. C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien, George Lucas. We've had a lot of that going on as well. Steve, anything that surprised you as far as this set of 25 outside of maybe the lack of comic book characters?
Well, it's kind of funny because of maybe it's showing our age or how much we've grown or how cultured we are, but the vast difference in characters that have shown up thus far is a bit surprising, because this does not resemble anything we've done before, with it being a top 100 list and from Geekcast Radio. So
yeah,
it's a little bit surprising to see what's popped up so far. I'm a little surprised that at least a couple comic book characters haven't snuck in here so far.
It could be higher.
Which kind of worries me for the rest of the 75. Just in that realm alone, because Lord knows there's a million comic book characters, and there's only by comparison, if you put them side by side, comic book characters would be equal to every other villain in the universe.
True.
So I'm a little scared with that, but I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what other major film villains show up, and other animated series villains or one-shot villains. I'm going to be hopefully not surprised by some that show up, and hopefully surprised by some that do show up. So it's going to be interesting as we progress.
Yeah, and one thing, like you guys have all mentioned, we definitely had a variety as far as decades go. I don't know how many decades we technically covered. I'm not going to count it up, but that's a lot that we covered. And one thing that we've avoided so far is the 90s bias. We've only had 3 characters from the 90s, and I don't think you would have been able to predict it going in. That would be Sephiroth, Eamon Goth, and Darth Maul.
Well, I think people just kind of got enough of that GCRN Wars tournament, and so they just were like, let's just skip everyone from the 90s.
Something. So that's it. That's number 100 through 76. You can leave your comments on the website, geekcastradio.com. You can leave us reviews on iTunes. You can chime in on Facebook. You can go back and look at some of the previous matchups we did with one-on-one matchups. You can comment them, even if it's been days since they were posted. We'll come back and reply to you. So you can do all of that stuff. But we have a lot of villains still to get through, so please do stay tuned for the future episodes, as we have 3 more episodes before we're done revealing this entire countdown. You can also interact with us on Twitter and find the handle there, as well as Facebook. So Steve, Dan, DJ, thank you guys for working through this. I think we did a decent job of at least knowing one thing about every character so far that was on the list. So there's that going for us, and hopefully it'll get even easier as we make our way to the top of the list. So leave us your feedback and stay tuned for next week's episode when we go through number 75 through 51. And don't forget to unleash the geek in you.
I love when a plan comes together.